A mirror stood, but gave no reflection. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Drop a comment with where you're tuning in. I love seeing this community grow. Your words make these mysteries shine brighter. Let's begin. If you're fond of beginnings, where a man in a black hat crashes through the door and confesses to 3 murders and a bank job, you'll have to look elsewhere. Our doorbell announced nothing more tragic than a visitor with taste enough to ring once and wait. In our line, that's almost a creed. I was at my desk in the office of the old brownstone on West 35th, rehearsing a speech to the phone company about a bill that tried to roll me like a drunk sailor when the chime tapped the air. It was 11:20, which meant that if I answered it, I would catch Wolfe at the tail end of his morning orchid session, a time when he prefers the world to be an unbroken egg. But the bell had been rung correctly, and that counted for something. I went to the door. On the stoop stood a woman with a parcel and a face built for choosing what happens next. She was no ingénue, 36 if she was a day, the kind who had learned to put her chin out and keep it there. The parcel was the kind of thing you see under one arm in an auction catalogue, flat, shrouded in brown paper and string, and hugged like it might try to get away. "Miss," I said, because I have manners when I have to. "I'm Lila Voss," she said. The name meant something. I filed it for later. "Is Mr. Wolfe available to receive a delivery and a proposition? If it's pizza, you're his enemy. If it's money, you're his friend. If it's both, I'll marry you." Neither. She glanced past me, taking the room's measure like a buyer checking corner smoke. "I have something that needs to be in that room and nowhere else in New York. And I need your Mr. Wolfe to agree to conditions he won't like." "We're already having a morning," I said. "Come in." She came in like she owned her own way through rooms and didn't mind proof. I showed her to the office. The air had that civilized smell of old leather, new paper, and Fritz's coffee drifting in from elsewhere. Wolfe's desk, mahogany broad enough to land a small plane, was empty because he was upstairs with the orchids, communing with 57 varieties of petulance. "Mr. Wolfe will be down in 6 minutes, I said. "He thinks clocks are for lesser men, but he respects them like competitors." She smiled as if she got it. She put the parcel on the red leather chair nearest the wall and rested her fingers on it. They were steady, but pressed the string a shade too hard. "What's in the package?" I asked, because I'm nosy and it's my job. "A mirror," she said. "One that refuses to reflect." "You've been undersold," I told her. "That sounds like all of us before noon." "It reflects every person who looks into it," she said, calmly, "except the one person who needs it to." I don't often let a brow get the better of me, but mine tried. I gave it a leash. "And you brought it to Mr. Wolfe because our decor is lacking in existential dread." "I brought it," she said, "because the person it refuses to reflect has been told she's losing her mind. She's not. Someone is trying to break her. They're doing it with money, influence, and patience. I know because I work for the kind of people who can afford all 3. She inclined her head toward the parcel. "This is the instrument. It must stay here for the next 24 hours. In that time, Mr. Wolfe will receive visitors demanding it. He will refuse, and he will accept my case on a fee schedule I will name and he will not like." "Lady," I said, "you don't need me. What you need is a genie." I let that sit, then went to the house phone to buzz the plant rooms. I got the 4th ring, which is when Wolfe picks up if he's feeling saintly. He wasn't. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, the way a man says it when he knows he'll regret the conversation. "Visitor," I told him. "Name of Lila Voss. Parcel. A mirror that refuses to reflect. A proposition you won't like and conditions even less." There was a silence you could butter and serve. "Pfui! I have orchids that do not deign to bloom in the presence of foolishness." She also says people will come to demand the parcel. She wants it to stay here for 24 hours. She's ready to pay. He muttered something to a cattleya that would have wilted an alderman and hung up. 2 minutes later, an indoor record. He entered. He was a large man, and the room knew it. He wore his brown house jacket and yellow shirt and looked like a Roman emperor at home among the pottery. He gave Miss Voss one look that measured her horsepower and then eyed the parcel as if it might go off. "Miss Voss?" he said. "Yes." She didn't offer a hand. Smart. He wouldn't have taken it. "My assistant can tell you that I abhor melodrama," Wolfe said, "and I have a special loathing for objects wrapped in brown paper, which invariably bring inconvenience. What is your business?" She didn't flinch. "Conservation. I'm an art conservator. I specialize in reflective surfaces, mirrors, polished metals, historic finishes. I consult for 3 museums and a clutch of patrons who buy old things so they won't look older." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, approving the grammar of that last clause, if not the client list. "Your name," he said, "is familiar." She nodded. "A donor plaque at the Met, a scandal at the Geller collection 2 years ago that wasn't my fault, and ended up not being a scandal depending on who you ask. And my brother is Leonard Voss." Even I twitched at that. Leonard Voss owned a quarter of Manhattan you could see and a third you couldn't. If he needed to buy a new mayor, he would bring his own pen. "I see," Wolfe said. He didn't like billionaires. He liked their checks. "The mirror." She undid the string with precise fingers, like she was untying a truth. The paper came off to show a rectangular frame, 19th century, gilt that had taken a beating and enjoyed it. The glass itself was clean, with the kind of depth that pulls you forward. She propped it against the chair. It reflected the office. Wolfe, me, her, the safe, the globe, the picture of the woman in the boat I never could decide whether I liked. "What does it refuse?" Wolfe asked, not moving closer. "Me," she said. "When I look into it, there's nothing where I should be. The room, yes. The chair behind me, yes. But where I am, an absence. Anyone else appears. Not me." I sat back. I like a good stunt, especially if I can spot the string. "Friend, our lighting is democratic. Step over." She stepped before the mirror and looked at herself. I looked at her, looking at nothing. Wolfe looked at the thing like it had insulted his soup. There's a trick all mirrors play where you can convince yourself anything you don't see must be there in spirit. This was not that. The frame held the room like a painting. My desk, the rug, the glass paperweight I always mean to hurl and never do. It held Lila to the extent of her shadow falling wrong in the line of where she ought to be. It did not hold her face, her figure, her anything. I checked angles. I sidled. I stepped in. When I leaned into the glass, it gave me the full Goodwin in morning bloom, tie a hair off, expression skeptical, features Irish as a bar tab. I stepped back. The lady leaned in. "Nothing." "Cute," I said, cheerfully suspicious. "How much rehearsal does it take to learn the choreography?" "Archie," Wolfe said, in the tone that keeps my better lines from seeing daylight. "To Miss Voss? When did you acquire it?" 6 months ago," she said. "From an estate sale in Yonkers, an old family with new debts. The provenance is unremarkable. Mid-1800s, New England, several generations in one house. I bought it for a client." She paused. 2 weeks after the purchase, it stopped reflecting me." "Stopped?" Wolfe interrogated the word. "At first it did, on the day I inspected it and when it was delivered to my studio. A week later, nothing." She touched the frame lightly. "I've examined it. I have done every test that does not alter it. There is no trick glass, no second surface, no filter I cannot find. If it's a device, it's beyond me. And if it's a device beyond me, only one person I know might be behind it." "Your brother," Wolfe said. She didn't pretend surprise. "Leonard is hosting a gala in 4 days. He intends to unveil a new philanthropic initiative. He also intends to announce that he is creating a private museum. His name, his rules. He asked me to be its founding director. I declined. Wolfe's lips moved a fraction, which for him is a laugh rolling its sleeves. You declined a kingdom. I declined a gilded cage, she said evenly. Leonard does not like refusals. He prefers corrections. For 2 weeks, someone has been tightening my world. Papers missing from my files. A client calling to say I authorized a purchase I didn't, with my signature attached, that mirror not reflecting me. He would do it carefully, through intermediaries, and he would tell himself it's for my own good. He wants me in his fold. If I lose credibility, I will have no choice. You brought the instrument you cannot explain, Wolfe said, to place it under my roof. Yes, for safekeeping, for observation, for leverage, and because if he wishes to disturb me, he will have to disturb you. That might discourage him. She glanced at me. Or it will force him to show himself. I didn't beam. I don't beam. But if she was putting us between Leonard Voss and the mirror, she wasn't wrong about the geography. Wolfe hates nothing more than his routines being invaded by swagger and perfume. People who tried often regret their choices and later their lives. Wolfe leaned back. He does that when he's testing whether he's hungry for a thing. Your conditions? The mirror remains here for 24 hours, she said. You will receive 3 visitors. One will be a representative from the Voss Foundation with a letter asserting ownership and demanding release of the property. One will be a curator from the Halberd Museum, where I consult, who will tell you that institutional reputation requires you to cooperate. The third will be my brother's general counsel, who will present a restraining order and threaten to explode. You will refuse each of them. You will accept my case. You will instruct Mr. Goodwin to investigate with a light hand, and you will not tell me the reason you've accepted, because I know you. The last had the edge of familiarity, but not intimacy. She knew our reputation and had done her homework. You presume, Wolfe said, but it was the kind of objection that puts out a welcome mat. And your fee, he added. Name your insult. She named it. It was adequate if you ate air. Wolfe's eyebrows tried to unionize. I can double it, she said, when you return the mirror and repair my situation, or if you prefer, you can send Mr. Goodwin to my studio, look at what I've documented, and then decide if the insult is worth swallowing. Your brother, Wolfe said, could ruin me if I were the kind of man he could ruin. He is accustomed to affecting weather. I'm not a weather vane. I know, she said. That's why I'm here. There was a pause while Wolfe examined the outline of his own annoyance, which is as close as he comes to affection. Fritz's footsteps sounded in the hall, lunch prep, faint promises of something with tarragon. The house held its civil breath. All right, Wolfe said. It's a phrase you don't often get and never cheap. Leave the mirror. Mr. Goodwin will accompany you to your studio this afternoon. You will furnish him with any documents, names, and schedules he requests. He will bring Saul Panzer in if he deems it necessary. You're accepting, she asked, and for the first time her voice thinned on the edges. I'm accepting, Wolfe said, for reasons I will not presently disclose. Her shoulders exhaled. Thank you. Do not thank me, he said. I suspect your brother is playing at compulsion. I detest compulsion. Also, I am mildly curious. That curiosity may sour. Archie. Here, I said. Call Mr. Panzer and hold him. Draft a receipt for the mirror and a statement of custody. Lock it in the safe if you can manage the dimensions. If not, in the cabinet and bar it. Then telephone Mr. Parker at Rusterman's and reserve a private table for 8 o'clock for 2 people who are not me. Meaning me and Miss Voss. Meaning that if you propose to eat before midnight, you will do it not at home. Fritz's menu is not adjustable, and you will be working. He looked at the mirror again. Miss Voss? Yes. If any of your 3 anticipated visitors arrive before you return, you will not be present. I do not stage my performances for the benefit of clients. He glanced at the clock. You have till 2:30 to return with your materials. Do not be late." She had the good sense not to ask if he was joking. She wrapped the mirror again, slowly and neatly, then unwrapped it again after Wolfe said, "Leave it bare," in the tone of a man deciding how a chess piece will look when it falls. "I'll be back at 2:30, she said. She reached the door and paused. "Mr. Wolfe, Leonard will come at this hard if he comes at all. He's relentless. He thinks other people are problems to be solved." "So do I," Wolfe said. "The difference is that I prefer to solve them with words." When she was gone, the room rearranged itself the way it does after a person leaves. Too quiet, too symmetrical, missing the weight of her decision. Wolfe settled into his chair with a grunt and planted his hands on the arms like a monarch, conceding the throne to the hour. He closed his eyes, opened them, and impaled me with a look. "Archie," he said, "do not attempt to explain that mirror to me with fancy talk about polarizing layers." "I wasn't going to," I said. "I was going to ask if we should charge extra for being used as a lightning rod in a billionaire's weather system." "We will charge appropriately," he said. "The piece is intriguing. The clients are odious. The brother is dangerous. The combination is nutritious." He reached for the bell pull. I preempted him and buzzed Fritz. When Fritz arrived, Wolfe gave him the bad news that dinner would be for one and that the menu would not suffer, even if the building did. "Understood, sir," Fritz said, looking at the mirror the way a man looks at an unexploded rumor. "Shall I dust it?" "No," Wolfe said. "Let it accumulate a respectable film. We may need to see what settles where." When Fritz retreated, I turned to Wolfe. "You took this because you hate compulsion?" "In part." He settled deeper. "Also because Miss Voss is not a fool and because Mr. Voss's influence has begun to annex neighborhoods that are none of his concern." "Less philosophically," I'm irritated. "Someone presumes to disturb the sanctity of this house. A sanctuary exists to be defended." "From mirrors," I said. "From impositions," he said, "and from lies. This mirror may be one or both. You will find out which." Noon. That meant lunch at 1 and orchids at 4, and the world threaded neatly in between. I drew up a receipt and a custody statement while Wolfe dictated formulations no one but a lawyer would love. I filed them, called Saul to hold himself in orbit, and tried Parker at Rusterman's, who was so thrilled to hear from me. He offered a table and a recipe for what I should do with it. I told him 2 at 8, and that if he put a candle on it, I would take it personally. I was halfway through locking the mirror in the cabinet when the doorbell tapped again. Once, correctly. The clock said 11:57. If Miss Voss's schedule had been optimistic, our visitor's ambition wasn't. "I'll get it," I told Wolfe. "Do," he said. "And Archie." "Yes?" "Do not be gallant. Be rude, as needed, but not gallant." "Boss," I said, "if gallantry is required, I'll charge extra." At the door, I found a man in a suit that had never known an off-the-rack moment, carrying a leather portfolio, fat with righteousness. He had a ring on his finger that said Undertaker or General Counsel. He went with the latter. "Nero Wolfe," he said, not asking. "I'm here for something that belongs to my client." "Your timing," I told him, "is terrible and improves your odds not at all." "Name?" "Durant," he said. "Elliot Durant. Voss Holdings." I stepped aside just enough to make this polite, which is the only brand we stock. "All right, Mr. Durant. Let's go ruin your morning." Durant entered the office like a warrant with shoes. He gave the room the kind of sweep a man gives right before he decides how much of it he intends to own. His eyes landed on the mirror, still propped bare against the red chair, and narrowed a millimeter. Then he remembered the obstacle course. Me, then the desk, then Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, as if reciting the caption on a courtroom portrait, "I'm here to recover property belonging to my client. You're in receipt of an item wrongfully removed from Voss Holdings." "Wrongfully," Wolfe repeated, investing 2 syllables with the weight of a writ. You have brought paper? Durant tapped the portfolio. A draft application for a temporary restraining order with supporting affidavit. I'm authorized to serve immediately upon filing. Then you have brought nothing, Wolfe said. Drafts are air with aspirations. Durant's jaw worked. His haircut had cost money and behaved like it. You are now on notice. The item was removed from company premises without authorization by an employee, Miss Lila Voss. We require its immediate return. Require, Wolfe murmured, as if tasting a spice he rarely allowed in the kitchen. You mistake this house for an annex. It is not. Miss Voss, Durant said, is unfortunately indisposed. Her recent conduct has prompted concern for her judgment. For her protection and the protection of valuable property, Voss Holdings has assumed custodial oversight of objects in her care. I was beside the mirror and didn't have to look at it to see how it caught that word, indisposed, and refused to throw it back. Durant's kind file people with their adjectives already attached. I kept my hands easy and my face easier. Custodial oversight, Wolfe said, a phrase by which theft travels in a chauffeured car. You said employee. Ms. Voss stated she is a consultant. Your grasp of facts is approximate. Durant's lips offered what might have passed for a smile in a darker room. If you prefer agent, the distinction is immaterial to ownership. The mirror was acquired with Voss funds. Any assertion otherwise will be addressed in court. Then address it there, Wolfe said. You will not address it here. You come to seize a chattel on unsupported claim. You will not. Additionally, you insult my client in my hearing. You will not do that, either. Durant shifted attention to me, as if the room might reorganize itself to make him happy. Mr. Goodwin, isn't it? Let's be practical. A vehicle is downstairs. We'll collect the object now and leave you to sort billing matters with Miss Voss at your convenience. I'm certain she'll thank you for avoiding, what shall we call it, unfortunate publicity. You have a gift for euphemism, I told him. If you're worried about publicity, I can recommend a lensman who works cheap and loves a billionaire's grimace. He took a step toward the mirror. It was small and meant nothing, and also not. People who reach for things in that room without permission rarely enjoy the outcome. I set my palm against the frame lightly. Not a shove, a suggestion. Do not, Wolfe said, neither loud nor soft. Durant stopped. He was a good listener in the ways that matter to men who keep their jobs. He switched to distance again. Mr. Wolfe, this is not a duel of wits. It's property law. You are obstructing the return of a valuable artifact to its rightful owner. If you persist, we will obtain the order, and we will involve the police. The police, Wolfe said, are busy men. Some of them are my acquaintances. When you obtain an order, you may present it. Until then, you will leave. Should you return, you will ring once and wait. That pattern of behavior may improve your cause in the long run. Durant eyed him as if calculating billable time lost to the art of futility. He unzipped the portfolio and withdrew 2 papers, placing them atop Wolfe's desk blotter without coming within range of Wolfe's reach. One was on the foundation's letterhead, thick, creamy, smug. The other was a draft cover sheet for a Supreme Court filing in a county that pays for marble to feel important. Consider yourself served for purposes of notice, he said. When the TRO is signed, I'll be back with the marshal. Spare us theatrics, Wolfe said. He didn't touch the papers. He wouldn't until they were cool. Your client's counsel may telephone me at 3 precisely. If he calls earlier, the connection will fail. That will be difficult, Durant said. I am counsel. My condolences, Wolfe retorted. Durant let the corner of his mouth move. It wasn't mirth. It was the twitch of a man ticking off a box. He shifted his gaze to the mirror, and this time it was curiosity, not possession, that leaked through. It's an amusing choice, he said. This particular object. We find its surface diverting, I said. It's the depth that worries me. He left before he got the joke, if there was one. The door closed with the sound of someone predicting victory to himself. I floated a hand toward the papers. "Tongs," I suggested. "Let them sit," Wolfe said. "I want dust on them." He tilted his head at the mirror. "Put it back where it was." I did. He watched, not the way a magician watches his assistant, but the way a botanist watches a leaf for the first sign of blight. His look at the glass was not feigned, he said. He came to seize, but he also came to see. Good. Curiosity is a leash. "Do you buy his narrative?" I asked. "Employee gone wobbly, property recalled for her own good." "I buy nothing," he said. He floated a weather balloon. "Note the timing. Miss Voss left minutes ago. He arrived minutes after. He was waiting around the corner. He expected her to bring the mirror here. He did not know in advance that she would. He has eyes on her, but not in her. Meaning he's watching, not listening. Meaning," he said, "that his surveillance is external. That limits his channels. You will discover them." Fritz buzzed to inform us that lunch was ready. Wolfe glanced at the clock, saw it had the decency to agree, and nodded. "Bring it in here," he told Fritz, a concession to circumstance that would make the annals. Then to me, "Call Mr. Panzer and release him, to shadow Mr. Durant from our stoop. Mr. Panzer will watch where Mr. Durant goes and whom he reports to before he files. He will be discreet. After lunch you will go to Miss Voss's studio." 2:30. Yes, if the second visitor comes. First, he will be dealt with. The third will be worse. "You ranked them." "I weighed their appetites," he said. "The foundation man will have a letter and a face for luncheons. The museum woman will wield shame like a dessert fork. The council will bring instruments. We have met one. We will meet the others." I phoned Saul with the assignment, and he said, "Uh-huh," twice in a way that meant Durant's route would be accounted for, then hung up without promising a thing he wouldn't deliver. Fritz arrived with trout meuniere that put sunshine in the room, plus baby potatoes and a green salad that could fix an election. Wolfe ate with attention, the kind that makes cutlery blush. I used the intermissions to scan the letters. The Foundations was signed by a man named Rivington Pierce, a moniker that grew on money like lichen. He wrote that the Voss Foundation's reputation was at stake and that civic cooperation would be remembered. The draft TRO had a paragraph that described Ms. Voss as presently impaired as to discretion. If slander had scent, that line smelled like a dentist's office. Between bites, Wolfe asked, "Her brother's museum?" "Private, his rules." She said no. "He will have a governing board to varnish vanity. Pierce will sit on it. The museum will want credibility, which requires her, if not as director, as endorser. Her refusal impedes legitimacy and thus money. If they cannot bring her in smiling, they will bring her in stumbling." He sipped beer. "I have seen this strategy employed with rare paintings and rare people. You think the mirror is a tactic, not a toy." He gave me a look designated for students who had at last found the chalk. If it were purely optical, it would bore me. As symbolism, it is crude but serviceable. As engineering, odd. "Did you see Miss Voss's face when Durant implied incompetence?" "I saw her not see herself," I said. "It's a look." "Just so. The point is not to prove her mad. It is to make her dread the diagnosis, to press until she accepts a shelter. His shelter. Perhaps he tells himself that there she will heal." Wolfe's lip curled. Philanthropy often masks possession. We finished. He dabbed his mouth. Fritz retrieved the plates and gave the mirror a cautious berth. As I reached for my jacket, the bell chimed again, one solitary note, decorous and inevitable. "The luncheon face," Wolfe predicted. I went to the door and opened on a man built for banquets, 60, tan preserved in olive oil, hair parted with philanthropy, boutonniere doing community service. Rivington Pierce had come as advertised, with a folder and an expression that could solicit seven-figure checks and make the donors feel they'd asked him for the favor. "Mr. Goodwin," he said warmly, "because people like him make it a point to know the names of stairs they intend to climb. Is Mr. Wolfe at liberty for a moment on a matter of civic grace?" "Mr. Wolfe is never at liberty," I told him, "but he's available. Wipe your feet." He did, a good sign, and followed me in. He rehearsed his lines on the way with a small exhale, then crossed to the desk and performed the appropriate beam at Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe, Rivington Pierce, Voss Foundation. A pleasure. I'll be brief. We seem to have landed in an awkwardness not of your making, and I've come to spare you the nuisance." "Spare me," Wolfe said dryly. How soothing. Pierce folded into the red chair opposite as if chairs were made to receive him. He flicked a glance at the mirror that was so quick you might have missed it if you'd been asleep. He didn't betray surprise. He betrayed practice. The man had toured collections. "I understand Miss Voss visited earlier," he began, "and that, quite innocently, I'm sure, she left here an object that properly belongs to the Foundation. I'm here to collect it, with gratitude, so we can put to rest an unfortunate misunderstanding and allow Miss Voss the peace she deserves." "You are here to collect nothing," Wolfe said. "You are here to lie with tenderness. It will not avail you." Pierce's smile didn't drop. It reposed, wounded. "Mr. Wolfe, must we be barbed? We serve the same city. The Foundation's work, arts education, conservation grants." "Pui," Wolfe said, free of rancor and full of judgment. "Do not peddle incense in my house. The object stays. Your letter stays. Your concern for Miss Voss's peace may be expressed by leaving her alone." Pierce tried a sigh, calibrated to awaken conscience in the unawakenable. "I had hoped," he said gently, "to rely on your famed discretion. It would be so easy. No publicity, no fuss. Simply allow my driver to—" "Your driver may take the air at the curb," Wolfe said. "You may depart. At 3, your coadjutor, the lawyer, will telephone. At 4, my orchids will occupy me. At 2:30, my assistant will be absent. The intervals are fixed." Pierce's gaze slid to me and back, measuring. "Miss Voss is unwell," he said, and let the word hang like a beneficent verdict. "We all wish what is best." "What is best," Wolfe said, "rarely arrives with an entourage." Pierce rose, realized how bluntly that acknowledged defeat, and softened the movement with a chuckle. "Very good, Mr. Wolfe. If you should reconsider, for the sake of a woman you are fond of—" "I am fond of very few women," Wolfe said, "and none of them require your endorsement." Pierce inclined his head, practiced at not slamming doors he might need to open later, and went. On the stoop, I saw Saul across the street, stock still as a lamp-post that could file affidavits, eyes following Durant's world and now Pierce's. I gave him a finger twitch that meant nothing to anyone but us. I checked the time. 2:10. Wolfe didn't have to tell me to go. He did anyway. "Take a cab. Sit in the back. If you're followed, you will not assume. You will confirm. At Miss Voss's studio, you will look at her files and at her fear. Bring back what is useful and what is odd. If a third visitor comes, I will occupy him. Be back by 6 unless detained by profit." "Right," I said. I slipped a glance at the mirror as I reached for the knob. In it, I saw the office neat as a sermon, Wolfe behind his desk like a bust with circulation, the red chair, the rug, the door, the corridor beyond. I didn't see me until I took one more step, and then I saw myself fine. It was nothing, angle, shadow, nerves, or something catalogued by a different department. I didn't mention it. I keep a ledger of oddities and let it accrue interest. Outside, the air felt like September deciding what kind of New York it wanted to be. I took the steps and the curb, raised a hand, and hailed a cab. In the window's pale reflection as it rolled to a stop, the city put my face back where it belonged. I got in and gave the driver an address in the Flatiron where restorers rent rooms with good light and bad neighbors, and we went south into the afternoon that does not care who you think you are. The cab was one of those that had seen enough New York to have opinions. It grumbled south on Lexington and let me out a block from the address I'd given, because I prefer to arrive with a little air under me and a look at the neighborhood in the glass of other people's lives. The Flatiron has buildings with bones. This one had a lobby that tried hard not to smell like turpentine and only half succeeded. A directory listed half a dozen artists, a dietitian, and one, Voss Conservation, by appointment only. I prefer an appointment when someone's done the engraving, so I pushed the buzzer. The lock clicked like a well-raised eyebrow. The second-floor corridor had paint scuffs that told a tale of rolled canvases and rolled eyes. Her door was open an inch. Not a scandal, but not an accident if you care about your work. I stood and listened. Silence plus the mild hum that good climate control makes when it wants to be loved. I touched the knob with a handkerchief, habit, not paranoia, and gave it 3 inches more. "Miss Voss?" I said into the room, because men who walk into women's studios unannounced belong to a club I don't join. "In here," she called, and I followed the voice past a reception table and a rack of lab coats to a working space the size of a one-act play. North light came through tall windows that had learned to be generous. There were 2 easels with fallen aristocrats, a workbench with tools in quiet rows, a humidity cabinet sulking in the corner, and a pair of wheeled carts doing time as co-conspirators. Miss Voss wore jeans, a chambray shirt rolled to the elbow, and the look of someone who'd survived the first volley and was arranging her next. "You're early," she said. "I like early. It means you expect to be delayed later." Pierce dropped by, I told her. He smiled at Wolfe and got frostbite. Durant came before him with paper fantasies. Saul is following one or both to see where they report before they file. Her mouth crooked. He'll have to choose which camera to wave at. Leonard likes lenses. "You mentioned you had documentation," I said. "And I brought a shopping list." I held up my notebook. "Names, times, oddities." "Good." She crossed to a lateral file and slid out a tan folder with the respect a priest gives liturgy. "Here's the intake. Photographs the day the mirror arrived. You'll love the dates and timestamps. Here's a second set from a week later, when it started refusing me. Here are my notes. I record materials, dimensions, condition. If someone breathed near that frame, it's in there." She placed them on the bench. "And here," she opened her phone and tapped a gallery. "Video." I had Cara film. She passed me the device. The first clip showed the mirror propped in her studio. The camera view caught Miss Voss stepping up and looking at herself. It was an ordinary scene. Woman meets woman. Glass does as glass does. The second clip, dated 9 days later, showed the same stage and cast, with one disappearance. Her. The room, the edges, the shadows, even the smudge of a thumbprint I could match between shots. Present. The person. Absent. Cara, whose voice belonged to a small woman with a big patience, said off camera, "Lila, you're not there." Lila's voice in the clip was even. "I know." "You tested other mirrors?" I asked. She tilted her head toward a Venetian number on the far wall that had the kind of etched flowers that keep florists honest. "All of them. I show up every place but in that one. I even did the dumb thing and stood between 2 so they'd catch each other. That one still refused me." "Camera, angle, polarization," I said, because Wolfe likes to hear his student at least audit the course. I went close to the bench and leafed through her notes. Her hand was a conservator's, tight script, clean lines, no mush. She'd measured from frame rabbit to mitre and noted that the glass had a second surface silvering, standard for the period, and that the back had been off sometime in the last decade. "How do you know that?" I asked, tapping. She came to my shoulder and pointed. "These screws are modern crosshead." 19th century would have been slot. The slot's scar on the wood shows earlier pulls, and the dust pattern under the lip is wrong if it had been sealed for a century. Someone opened, closed, cleaned edges, and did not seal properly. Someone like you, I said, or someone like a rival who wanted to make you look like an amateur? Her face didn't move, but the air around it thinned. Milo Deck would like me to look amateur, she said. He's a restorer who thinks secrets make him bigger. He lost 2 contracts to me this year. He'll tell you that's because I flatter donors and wear decent shoes. I wrote, Milo Deck, resentment, access. There's nothing like a rival to sprout keys. Who else, I asked, knew this piece was in your shop? Leonard, she said. I told him I'd found something charming for a client's foyer and that it wasn't his. He said everything beautiful that crosses my hands is his by natural law. Elliot Durant, of course. He CCs himself on half of Leonard's life. Rivington Pierce. He walks through clients' worlds and pretends he's invisible. Dr. Tamsin Kell at the Halberd. I flagged it to her for an exhibition on domestic interiors. She has tenure in condescension and told me the piece lacked gravitas. Dr. Kell also being, I said, the likely second visitor to Wolfe. She blinked. She called at 1 and said she'd smooth this over with you. I told her not to bother and that she had nothing to do with it. She dislikes being told she has nothing to do with anything. And Kara? I asked. You said she filmed. She have a last name. Mendez. Good assistant. Smart eye. She's on stipend from a conservation program and 2 other jobs. She has a brother who likes taking risks with other people's money, so she sometimes looks at her phone as if it owes her an apology. That's a motive, I said. Not a verdict. She nodded without flinching. My world is small enough that everyone in it either needs money, reputation, or both. That includes me. A studio tells on its owner when the owner's not looking. I let my eyes roam. On the solvent shelf, the bottles were aligned, label out, in an order that was almost right. Ethanol, acetone, toluene, mineral spirits, xylene. Only the acetone and ethanol had traded places, which no one who handles them would do unless they were making a point or didn't know better. A drawer of scalpels held 1 empty slot with a faint bright crescent where a blade had sat until recently. On the floor by the humidity cabinet, there was a ghost of a footprint in the fine layer of dust that settles even in clean rooms. Half-moon tread, small, with a scuff on the outer edge. I crouched and looked, then pretended I was only tired of standing. Kara's shoes? I asked. Converse, she said. She thinks rubber soles are a worldview. This isn't that, I said. And the door was open a hair when I got here. She frowned. I closed it. You didn't lock it, I said, and she shook her head once at herself, disgusted but not surprised. Twice, she said. This week I came in to find things just off. A brush rolled under the bench that I didn't drop. A test panel leaned against the wrong wall. I told myself I was over-aware because of the mirror. She spread her hands. Paranoia and observation are roommates. I try not to confuse their laundry. Good, I said. Confusion is how men like your brother win without saying they played. Where's your building sign-in? At the desk. Mr. Lupo keeps a book because he thinks computers breed liars. I'll make him my Valentine. I set my notebook down, took a little block of Post-its from my pocket, a trick I picked up from a man who could tell if a doorknob had been loved, and tore a strip. I placed it along the edge of the studio door at hinge height, a hair's breadth proud of the jam. If the door opened, the paper would curl, a small confession in a world that loves big ones. Don't touch that, I told her. If you need to leave, use the other door and throw the bolt on this one. I'd also like to see your email relatives, any demand notes, any requests for access, any IT favors offered by men with clean haircuts. She moved to the computer and pulled up a thread that made my scalp itch. A vendor, Greer Security Integrations, had written politely that the foundation would cover an upgrade to her studio's monitoring system. All she had to do was accept a service window and sign a short agreement that would allow remote health checks. "Victor Greer," she said. "Leonard uses him when he wants to feel paranoid but well-dressed." "The service window?" I asked. "Last Tuesday," she said. 9 to 11. And the mirror started misbehaving. "When?" "Thursday before," she said. "Greer came after. But we both know the cart comes before the horse sometimes if the driver wants to confuse directions." I took a picture of the email with my phone and then of the foot scuff and the solvent shelf. "You have insurance documentation for the mirror? A receipt?" "In the safe." She hesitated. "Don't hate me, but I moved it out of the safe 2 days ago so I could bring it to you in a hurry. I put it back yesterday." She crossed to a small safe tucked under the sideboard and spun the dial with the intimacy of a woman who knows her combinations and her sins. She opened it, reached in, and came out holding a folder. "Here, purchase from the Crawley estate. Bill of sale. The client's name is redacted because she values privacy and breathing. The payment came from my account, reimbursed upon delivery." The folder smelled faintly of linseed and graphite, which told me hands had been near both and then near this. The paper inside was undisturbed except where a corner had a new dog air not consistent with the way she handled her life. I flattened it and found an index card tucked behind the invoice that didn't belong. Creamstock embossed with the halberd's crest. 4 words in a thin, impatient hand. "You're making this harder." No signature, no date. I showed it. It touched her face and went away. "Tamsin," she said. "She uses that card to remind herself she's official." "And to remind others," I said. "When did you last have her here?" "Week before last. She said she was doing her rounds of studios to keep donors feeling watched over." She stood there. Lila pointed at the solvent shelf. "And gave me a lecture on the ethics of balancing private clients and institutional duty." "The acetone and ethanol would like to file a complaint," I said. "She's left-handed." "Yes. How did you—" "The way the labels are turned. A right-hander would have put the acetone back on the right. A left-hander put it on the left, and you haven't touched it because you thought you were imagining impositions." She breathed in once, deep enough to cost. I hate that I let them inside my head. "They'll stop renting soon," I said. "Meanwhile, I need names of donors who'd enjoy a mirror that eats a woman for lunch." "Eleanor Whitby," she said promptly. "Old family, new purse." She commissioned the mirror for a hall in her townhouse with the explicit instruction that she wanted something that would make her guests feel a little examined. She likes theater. She also sits on the Halberd board and is rating Leonard's new museum for menace. If Leonard wants her on his side, making me look unstable would be one way. She's too smart to do anything crude, but not too smart to enjoy it. I wrote, "Whitby, board, client, taste for spectacle." The list had begun to assume the shape I like, not the edges of a net, but its knots. We went downstairs and let Mr. Lupo be delighted that a man wanted to look in his book. He produced it like a sacrament. 2 unfamiliar hands, written today. 12:10, E. Durant, which wasn't him, because he'd been north insulting my boss at 11:57, and 1:05, T. Kell. Both had a flourish meant for readers. Underneath, in smaller, apologetic letters from yesterday, "Whitby Courier, package." Lupo scratched his head. "He had a suit like a Sunday," he said. "Said he had to pick up a piece for Mrs. Whitby's decorator. Miss Voss was out. He had a key." "I do not hand out keys," Lila said, each word polished with fury. "Kara was here," Lupo said miserably. "She said she'd sign for it. He went up with her and came down with nothing. Not my business," I thought. "It is now," I said. "Describe him." "Medium," Lupo said. But he stood like he was taller. Hair like a bathtub ring. Voice like he'd eaten a dictionary. Durant's clerk, Lila said. Or Greer's. Or Leonard's housemen. They're interchangeable if you're the furniture. Back upstairs, I photographed the sign-in lines and the apologetic slant of the courier's hand. My phone buzzed. Wolfe, who does not text unless the world disobeys. The halberd woman has come and gone, he wrote. Her fork was sharp. It bent. She left a message for you. She has no patience for cowboy conservation. Also, Mr. Durant's filing is not yet made. Mr. Panzer reports a detour to one Victor Greer's office, return with documentation and a transcript of Miss Voss's enemies. I pocketed the phone and saw that the post-it at the hinge had an infant curl, very slight, as if the door had sighed and taken it with. I looked at the bolt above the jamb. The paint around the screw plate had a faint new crescent where a screwdriver had misjudged its zeal. Someone's been testing boundaries, I said. Someone, she agreed, has learned that if they move my life a quarter inch at a time, I'll argue with myself instead of with them. Not anymore, I said. Here's how this goes. I take copies of your files and the halberd love note. You keep the originals in the safe and lock it, and don't open to anyone whose ancestry you can't recite. I'm going to pay a visit to Greer's office and see what he sells rich men when they're bored. If Kara returns, you greet her kindly and ask her to remember the courier's shoes. If she gets indignant instead of helpful, you call me. Tonight at 8, you and I will sit at a table with silverware and gloves and discuss why men who think they own the weather always forget about the humidity. Her chin rose the way it had on our stoop. I'll be there, she said. And Archie, tell Mr. Wolfe that if he keeps the mirror in his office, he should not let it stare at him. It enjoys that. Most mirrors do, I said. They're vain. I took the folder, zipped it into my case, checked the door once more, and set the bolt. In the stairwell's cracked mirror, a man I recognized looked back at me without complaint. On the sidewalk, the city resumed being itself, and across the street, a sedan that had been idle for 10 minutes decided to learn to move again. I didn't assume. I confirmed in the chrome of a parked motorcycle. Same half-shadowed driver, same posture of patience, same tendency to itch his jaw at red lights. I let him earn the story while I turned the corner and looked for a cab that would take me over to Madison, and the kind of office where security is a commodity and conscience is an add-on. Greer Security Integrations had an office that tried to look more like a gallery than a shop that sold paranoia. The brass plate on Madison was understated, the lobby sleek, the receptionist half her attention in a screen and half in a gloss magazine she wasn't supposed to have out. I gave her a name, Victor Greer, and she gave me the look of someone deciding whether to classify me as retail or wholesale nuisance. I smiled like I meant to buy 3 alarms and a subscription to smugness. She pressed a button, and a door unlatched with a whisper meant to suggest importance. The inner office was glass, steel, and leather that had never met dirt. Victor Greer stood behind his desk, tall, tidy, with the kind of tie that said he had a valet, even if he didn't. His handshake was smooth as insurance, but he didn't offer it. Instead, he gestured me into a chair designed for cooperation. "Mr. Goodwin," he said in a tone that tried to slot me into a file. "What service can I provide?" "I don't buy security systems," I told him. "I investigate what they hide. I'd like to know about a client of yours. Miss Lila Voss. A week ago, you offered to install new monitors in her studio. Said the foundation would cover it." His eyes didn't flicker. Men like him train theirs. All offers are confidential. Our clients rely on that. I'm not your client, and Miss Voss didn't accept. That leaves you free to say whether the offer came from her brother or his shadows. He let silence breathe for 5 counts. That meant he was deciding whether I was bluffing. "Mr. Voss," he said finally, "is a valued patron. From time to time he asks us to extend courtesies. In Miss Voss's case, an offer to modernize security. Purely protective. Protective, I said, in the sense of doors locked from the inside. Greer's smile was a blade. I assume you're representing Nero Wolfe. I'm aware of his reputation. My advice, if you'll take it, is to counsel your employer to stay clear of family matters. Leonard Voss does not tolerate interference. I leaned back, letting the chair creak. You know Durant went to Wolfe's house this morning. You know Pierce went after. You know Dr. Kell stopped by to sprinkle academic holy water. So don't play unbriefed. Tell me what you sold them. A trick mirror? A surveillance line? Both? That earned me his first blink. Small, but a blink. Our firm sells security solutions, not novelties. Then you don't deny touching the mirror. He picked up a Mont Blanc and twirled it, a move rehearsed to look casual. The object in question, he said slowly, passed through one of our technicians' assessments when it was brought to Miss Voss's studio. A routine sweep. We found nothing unusual. No cameras, no emitters. It is glass and frame. Period. Yet she vanishes from it, I said. Funny trick for glass. Mirrors, he said, are about perception. If Miss Voss believes she doesn't see herself, perhaps that's the point someone wished her to absorb. The way he said someone had more weight than he liked. I stood. If that someone is your client, you're either complicit or credulous. I'll let Wolfe decide which. In the meantime, tell Durant that Wolfe's not in the rental business, and if you find yourself drafting another courtesy offer, try not to include the word impaired. Judges don't like it. His jaw stiffened, but he didn't stop me on the way out. In the lobby, the receptionist had her magazine open again, and in the polished brass of the elevator door, I caught a reflection of myself that was sharp enough to shave. When the cab pulled away, I let the city's noise drown Greer's voice in my head. Back at the brownstone, the mirror waited where I'd left it, the room holding its breath. Wolfe was in his chair, yellow shirt glowing against the mahogany, eyes half-lidded but alive. Report, he said. I gave him Greer, word for word, the folder from the studio, the halberd note, the solvent shelf, the sign-in book, the courier's phantom. He listened, not moving, his fingers making a steeple at his chin. So, he said at last, an object stripped, resealed, and possibly tampered with. A family that confuses possession with philanthropy. A rival who plays games with tools, and an assistant with a brother who gambles. It will suffice. And Greer? I asked. A man who sells fear while pretending to neutralize it, Wolfe said. Which means he traffics in illusions. Appropriate. The bell rang again, once. Polite. Wolfe's eyes opened. The third visitor, he said. Let him in, Archie, and do not, under any condition, allow him near that mirror. I opened the door and met the third act. Durant had been the muscle with paper, Pierce the diplomat with lace, but this man came with the air of a hammer that had already chosen its nail. He was younger than I expected, 40 maybe, built spare but tight, with a dark suit cut for intimidation and a voice I pegged as a courtroom weapon. He carried a briefcase, the kind with brass locks that expected to be feared. Mr. Goodwin, he said as if my name were already in evidence, I'm Conrad Laird, General Counsel to Voss Holdings. I have business with Mr. Wolfe. Most people who say that leave unhappy, I told him. But come on in. We charge extra for theatrics, so be sparing. He brushed past me like I was furniture and entered the office with a quick scan that took in Wolfe, the mirror, and the files on my desk. He didn't bother sitting until Wolfe inclined his head, a gesture that might have been mistaken for welcome, but wasn't. Mr. Wolfe, he began, and laid his briefcase flat on the desk blotter without permission. You are harboring property that belongs to my client. This is a direct violation of the law. I have a signed restraining order here that compels you to release it immediately. Compels, Wolfe echoed. How tedious. He didn't move, but I could feel the shift in the room, the way Wolfe tightened ownership of the air. I leaned against the globe and crossed my arms, ready to enjoy the show. Laird opened the briefcase and withdrew a document in a blue-backed legal sleeve. He laid it out as though Wolfe should kiss the seal. This was signed by Judge Denker at 2:30 this afternoon. It orders you to surrender the mirror to officers of the court upon presentation. Upon presentation, Wolfe said, by officers of the court. You are not an officer of the court. You are a mouth with a retainer. Laird's nostrils flared. I can have the marshal here within the hour. Do you wish to add contempt to your list of troubles? Mr. Laird, Wolfe said with the patience of a man explaining chess to a beetle, you may parade your vocabulary elsewhere. This house is not a warehouse for your client's appetites. You have a writ which you may present properly. Until then, you will remove yourself. That was when his eyes slid toward the mirror, and I saw something I hadn't seen in Durant or Pierce. Hunger. Not curiosity, not diplomacy. Hunger. He wanted it. His gaze lingered too long, as if the glass owed him something. I don't know what con Miss Voss has enlisted you in, he said, lowering his tone to something meant to sound reasonable. But you are obstructing the law and placing yourself in personal jeopardy. Leonard Voss does not forgive men who interfere in his affairs. You may consider this your final warning. Wolfe's lips barely moved. A man who delivers final warnings is a man who fears his first ones have failed. You may go. Laird's jaw set. He gathered his papers, shoved them into the briefcase with more force than was necessary, and snapped the lock shut. But before he left, he gave the mirror one last look. He stepped close, too close, and bent slightly as though testing his own reflection. His eyes met his face in the glass, and whatever he saw made his mouth twitch in something like disbelief. He straightened fast, shot Wolfe a look half anger and half calculation, and strode out. The door shut. Silence. Wolfe shifted in his chair, the leather groaning as though it understood something the rest of us didn't. Archie, he said, secure the latch. Mr. Laird's curiosity exceeds his instructions. I locked the door and came back. He looked at the mirror, I said, and didn't like what it told him. Indeed, which is informative. The mirror reflects him, but he doubted it. A mind that doubts its own image is a mind already at war with itself. I pulled out my notebook. So we've had 3 visitors, all trying different angles. Durant with force of law, Pierce with velvet, and Laird with fire. They want the mirror badly enough to risk insulting you in your own office, which tells me Leonard isn't content to wear her down. He wants the piece itself. Yes, Wolfe murmured, and that complicates the thesis. If the mirror is merely a prop to unsettle Miss Voss, then possession is irrelevant. If he seeks it for its own sake, then the object contains more than deception. I told him about Greer's evasions, the sweep, the denials that tasted rehearsed. Wolfe listened, fingers tapping the arm of his chair. Greer lies by omission, he said. He admitted an assessment, denied a device, but the screws Miss Voss noted, the pattern of intrusion in her studio, the courier with a key. Someone has indeed tampered. The question is not only how, but why. The bell rang again, 2 sharp chimes. I started for the door, but Wolfe stopped me with a word. No? We waited. The chimes came again, longer, insistent. I moved anyway and peered through the glass panel. Not Durant, not Pierce, not Laird. Woman, slight, sharp, with dark hair pinned up, her coat wrinkled from haste. She had the look of someone who'd just run up from the subway without deciding whether to be nervous or angry. It's the assistant, I said. Cara Mendez. Wolfe exhaled through his nose. Let her in, but gently. She's either frightened, foolish, or forced. I opened the door. Cara stepped in, hugging her satchel like it might escape. She looked from me to Wolfe to the mirror, and her eyes widened. She swallowed once, hard, then said in a voice that wanted to be steady, Mr. Wolfe, You don't know me, but I need to tell you something before it's too late. They think I gave them the key." That landed in the air like a dropped blade. Wolfe gestured to the red chair, the one that had hosted our parade of suitors. She sank into it, still clutching her satchel. Her fingers were trembling just enough to make the clasp click. "You will tell us everything," Wolfe said, his voice flat as a gavel. "And you will start with who they are and why you now fear them." Kara's eyes darted to the mirror, then back to him. "Because if I don't," she whispered, "Leonard Voss is going to ruin her, and me along with her." Kara's whisper hung in the room, thin but sharp enough to cut through Wolfe's steady hum of disapproval. She sat stiff in the red chair, her satchel gripped like a lifeline, and I could see the pulse in her neck working overtime. Wolfe shifted, not much, just enough to make the chair complain. That little movement was his version of leaning forward with both fists on the table. "Explain," he said. She took a breath that didn't quite fill her lungs. "Last week a man came to the studio. He said he was sent by Mrs. Whitby, the donor. He had a delivery slip with her name and letterhead. Miss Voss was out, and he told me it was urgent, that he needed to check the mirror for condition before transport. He knew my name. He knew I was new. He was persuasive. I let him in. He was there maybe 20 minutes. I didn't watch him every second, and when he left, I signed the log. I thought it was routine, but when Miss Voss found things out of place later, I knew. And now they think it was me." "You signed," Wolfe said, "for an intrusion." Her eyes flickered. "Yes, and I didn't tell her right away. I thought if nothing was missing, I could keep quiet. But then this morning, someone called me. A woman. She said if I didn't cooperate, she'd make sure the stipend from the foundation disappeared. She said I'd already shown I was willing to open doors. All I had to do was keep doing it. She didn't say her name, but I think it was Dr. Kell. She has that clipped voice, like she's grading you even if you don't go to her class." I leaned against the desk. "And now you're here because?" Kara licked her lips. "Because I'm scared. They're using me to make Miss Voss look careless. They'll say she hires incompetent help, lets strangers in, can't keep her studio secure. It'll ruin her, and if she goes down, I go with her." She looked at Wolfe. "I thought if anyone could stop them, it would be you. I don't care if you hate me for being stupid, just don't let them bury her." For once, Wolfe didn't immediately scold the air. He regarded her with the expression he saves for things that confuse him slightly, but not enough to offend him. His eyes closed halfway. "Miss Mendez, you are an accomplice by negligence, not malice. That is regrettable, but not unforgivable. Your confession is belated, which lessens its value, but it is still of use." She sagged in the chair as if he'd pardoned her sins. I didn't join in the chorus. "So what exactly did this courier do in 20 minutes? Swap screws, leave a note, wipe fingerprints, set a trick in the glass?" Kara shook her head. "I don't know. I wasn't watching him every second. He asked me for acetone, said he wanted to clean an edge. I fetched it, that's all. I remembered the swapped bottles on the solvent shelf. Acetone, huh? And you're sure it wasn't ethanol he took?" She blinked. "Ethanol. No, I brought him the acetone from the second shelf. Left side." That confirmed it. Left side now meant right side then. Somebody had shuffled the bottles after the fact. Dr. Kell's calling card, as Wolfe would say. "Boss," I said, "this courier isn't a delivery boy. He's a plant. He fiddled with the frame while Kara was fetching solvents. If Kell's involved, she may have pointed him where to look. And if Whitby's name was on the slip, she's at least lending her paper." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Precisely. The scheme is layered. Leonard Voss provides pressure. Durant, Pierce and Laird provide instruments. Whitby and Kell provide social varnish. Greer provides technical misdirection. And Miss Mendez here," he opened his eyes full on her, "provides access." Kara flinched. "Not anymore. I swear, "Spare me," Wolfe said. "You will do as you are told. You will remain silent, and if approached again, you will agree but not comply. You will record every word, every demand. Mr. Goodwin will equip you with means." That was my cue. "Sure," I said. "I'll set her up with a recorder, smaller than her conscience. But what's the play? If they already think she's their lever, they'll keep pressing." "Which is what I want," Wolfe said. "They will press until they believe success inevitable, at which point they will overreach, and then we shall apply counterweight." He closed his eyes again. "Archie, telephone Mr. Panzer. Instruct him to continue with Durant, but to note if Durant meets with Laird tonight. The two together are combustible. Then contact Fred Durkin. He will keep an eye on Miss Mendez when she leaves to see if anyone follows. She is bait, but bait must not be lost." Kara shivered at the word, but nodded. "I'll do whatever you say." "You will," Wolfe said, "because your alternatives are dire." He rang for Fritz and instructed him to provide Miss Mendez with coffee and a sandwich. When she followed Fritz to the dining room, Wolfe opened his eyes fully, which meant I was about to be educated. "Archie," he said, "the mirror is not merely a symbol. It is an instrument. Someone has engineered it, chemically or mechanically, to exclude one image. Miss Voss's image. That is artifice, not mysticism, but the purpose is psychological, not physical. It is meant to isolate her, to make her question her senses. That requires her brother's ambition, Dr. Kell's science, Greer's devices, and Whitby's appetite for theater. They collaborate, which means we are not facing one adversary, but a cabal." "Which," I said, "makes your usual office gathering a little crowded." "On the contrary," Wolfe replied, "it makes it necessary. We will summon them all tomorrow evening. Here, you will draft the invitations with my phrasing. Miss Voss will return, and she will be present, and when they arrive, we will strip them one by one until the truth stands naked." "Sounds cheerful," I said. "You want me to add a line about dessert?" He ignored that. "In the meantime, you will dine with Miss Voss as planned. You will observe her. You will gauge her strength. If she falters, she cannot withstand tomorrow. If she holds, then we proceed." The clock on the mantel chimed 6. Wolfe reached for the bell cord and tugged once. Fritz reappeared, announced that Miss Mendez was calmer and fed, and that Saul had left word. Durant and Laird had indeed met briefly, then gone separate directions. Wolfe absorbed it with a grunt, then dismissed us both with a wave. "Archie," he said as I reached the door, "a mirror may refuse to show one reflection, but a cabal cannot help showing itself if placed in the right light. We will supply that light." Outside, twilight had dropped a shade over 35th Street. I hailed a cab, Rusterman's address on my lips, and thought about dining with a woman who could not see herself in glass, but might still be the clearest image in a room full of liars. Rusterman's never disappoints, which is probably why Wolfe keeps it in his stable of acceptable establishments, though he treats eating there himself like slumming. They'd reserved us a private table by the window, linen white as an alibi and silverware that shone without needing to be told. Lila Voss was already there when I arrived, standing in a frame of candlelight that did her no harm. She wore black, plain but cut so well it looked inevitable. "You're on time," she said, when I took the chair opposite. "Only because Wolfe told me to be," I said. "Left to myself, I'd still be arguing with the cab." That earned me half a smile, which was a start. The waiter ghosted in. Menus appeared, and before long we had duck with cherry reduction in our near future. Rusterman's believes a man should eat like he expects the world to keep turning. I leaned back. "You've had a day. Durant, Pierce, Laird, all lined up like bad chorus members, and now Kara, who thinks she's holding up the scenery while they rearrange the stage." Lila's eyes darkened at the mention. "She told you. She came to the brownstone herself. Nervous, shaken, carrying guilt like it was contraband. She admitted letting in a courier with Whitby's name on the slip. She thinks she's ruined you. She hasn't ruined me, Lila said firmly. She's young. They found her weak point. They'll keep pressing. She put down her glass. I can't blame her. They'd press me the same way if they could. They are pressing you, I said, through the mirror, through whispers of incompetence, through the Foundation's letters and Durant's paper storms, but you're still sitting here, which means they haven't won yet. She met my gaze squarely. It's not just about me. Leonard doesn't like loose ends. If Kara thinks she's a liability, she's right. He'll cut her off, and once she's discarded, she'll be blamed. Permanently. That was the moment I knew she wasn't just fighting for herself. Wolfe had suspected it. I was confirming it. She wasn't the type to sacrifice her people, even when they stumbled. Wolfe's plan is to bring them together tomorrow night, I said. Every last one of them. Leonard's lawyers, his foundation, Whitby, Kell, Greer, all of them in one room. He'll turn the mirror into a test case and strip their masks. Her brow lifted. That sounds like theater. It is theater. Wolfe's theater. You'd be surprised what he can do sitting in one chair with nothing but words. She hesitated, as if measuring her own capacity against the prospect. And you want me there? Wolfe wants you there. He says you're the fulcrum. Without you, the liver has nothing to move. The duck arrived, and we let it command silence for a few minutes. Between bites, I watched her hands. They didn't tremble. Whatever the mirror had done to shake her, she'd rebuilt enough to hold a fork steady. That boded well for tomorrow. Halfway through dessert, a chocolate torte Wolfe would have approved of, she leaned in. You asked me earlier for oddities. There's one more. 2 weeks ago, I got an anonymous package. Inside was a small shard of mirror, wrapped in velvet. No note, no sender, just the shard. When I looked at it, it reflected me, perfectly. I kept it in my desk, and then last week it was gone. That's the kind of souvenir you don't misplace, I said. Who knew you had it? Only Kara. And Leonard if he watches my mail. Maybe Kell if she was snooping when she came through. But I never told anyone else. I filed that away. A shard that reflected her when the whole didn't. Somebody wanted her to know she wasn't crazy, just trapped. Or somebody wanted to control both the disease and the cure. When we left Rustermann's, the night had teeth in the air. A black sedan idled across the street, engine soft, driver a shadow. I guided her toward my cab, keeping my hand light at her elbow. Don't look, I said, but you've got admirers. I expected to, she said, calm as stone. I put her in first, slid in after, and gave the driver her address. As we pulled away, I checked the mirror. The sedan slid into traffic 3 cars back. Saul would have called it routine. I called it confirmation. At her building, I saw her inside the lobby before I told the cabbie to keep rolling. When we reached the brownstone, Wolfe was still in his chair, eyes open, lips compressed. He listened as I gave the report. Kara's confession, Lila's steadiness, the shard that had gone missing. He didn't move until the end. Then, they have overreached. The shard proves the object can reflect her, which means the absence is manufactured. Tomorrow evening they will be her, and tomorrow evening they will convict themselves. I asked the obvious. And if they don't show? They will show, Wolfe said, because they cannot help themselves. Compulsion, Archie. It drives them as hunger drives me. And once they are here, the mirror will refuse more than one reflection. It will refuse them. He closed his eyes. That was dismissal. I went to my desk, wrote the invitations in Wolfe's exact phrasing, and sent them out by messenger. Each one ended with the same sentence. Mr. Wolfe requires your presence tomorrow at 8 o'clock, without fail, concerning the matter of the Voss mirror. The house was silent again, except for the mirror in the corner, which seemed to hold more air than glass. I didn't look too long. Not yet. Tomorrow, Wolfe would make everyone else look, and that would be the real show. Morning at the brownstone usually smells like Fritz's sourdough starting its day and Wolfe's orchids plotting coups upstairs. That morning it smelled like tension. Wolfe stayed in the plant rooms until nearly 11, which told me he was thinking harder than he wanted company for. I used the time to double-check that the invitations had been delivered. Every one of our players had signed for theirs. Durant's secretary had sniffed but signed. Pierce scribbled his flourish like he was autographing a novel. Laird didn't bother disguising his irritation. Dr. Kell had initialed with a tiny flourish of superiority. Whitby's footman took hers, and Greer's receptionist accepted with the composure of a woman used to being told her boss was indispensable. In short, they all knew. When Wolfe finally came down, I gave him the status. He grunted once, then ordered beer in silence until lunch. Over lamb with mint sauce, he announced, "They will come." "You sound confident," I said. "I am," he replied, "because refusal to appear is, in their eyes, admission of weakness. They are incapable of it. Their entire game is built on pretense of control. They cannot afford absence." That was Wolfe's way of telling me to brace for a house full of trouble. I spent the afternoon making sure the office looked exactly as it should. No files left open, no clutter, no tricks beyond Wolfe's own. The mirror stood in its corner, draped now with a linen cloth at Fritz's insistence. Fritz claimed it made the kitchen staff nervous. I left it draped. Suspense plays better when revealed at the right moment. At 7:30, sharp the bell rang. Saul came in first, trench coat damp from the rain, to report that Durant and Laird had met again over coffee and paper stacks, but had not spoken long. Fred Durkin arrived behind him to say he'd tailed Kara safely to and from her evening class, with no sign of trouble. Ori was stationed uptown in case Pierce tried a stunt with the press. Wolfe listened, eyes shut, lips moving only to taste beer. At 10 to 8, he opened them. "Bring them in one at a time. Assemble them when they have all arrived." Durant was first, looking like he'd practiced his indignation in the cab. Pierce came next, smile already polished for the audience. Laird was stone-faced, briefcase in hand like a weapon. Whitby swept in with a scarf too dramatic for the weather. Dr. Kell wore disdain like cologne. Greer entered last, carrying the smugness of a man who'd sold everyone in the room something they didn't need. They all saw each other and froze in that first moment, realizing this was no private conference. Wolfe let them stew. Finally, he gestured. "Be seated." The red leather chairs filled, the air heavy with resentment. Wolfe looked at none of them, only at the draped mirror. He said, "You have all come because you require dominion over an object you neither understand nor own. It has been tampered with, deliberately, and that tampering has exposed you." Pierce coughed into his fist. Durant shifted. Laird's jaw tightened. Whitby's eyes glittered, curious despite herself. Kell crossed her legs like a queen. Greer smoothed his tie. I stayed by the globe, ready to referee if voices got louder than Wolfe's could crush. The stage was set, the curtain barely raised. Wolfe let the silence deepen until even the confident ones began to fidget. Then he said, "The mirror will speak tonight, and when it does, it will not only reflect glass, it will reflect guilt." That was the moment the linen dropped, and for the first time the mirror faced them all. Wolfe let the linen fall without flourish. The room took itself in. The mahogany, the rug, Wolfe enthroned, me by the globe, the parade of polished enemies, and the mirror catching it all like a well-bred witness. Reflex made every eye glance to its own image. Reflex also sorted them, who checked first, who checked last, who pretended not to look. Durant darted. Pierce glimmered. Laird measured. Greer preened. Whitby admired the frame instead of herself. Dr. Kell didn't flicker. She already knew what she'd see. "Miss Voss," Wolfe said, and I stepped to the door. Lila entered without ceremony, black, simple dress, chin level. She had brought her steadiness from Rustermann's and set it down like a place card. If any of them were surprised she was there, they concealed it behind money. "You will indulge me," Wolfe told the room. "We will conduct a series of observations. Resist the urge to perform. I will make all the performances needed." No one agreed. No one left. That was consent in our theatre. "Miss Voss," he went on, "stand before the mirror as you did this morning." She did, 3 feet out, centered. The glass presented our office and a lilac-shaped absence, as advertised. Whitby made a small sound, appetite disguised as pity. Durant's mouth tightened the way a man's does when the evidence starts making his argument. Greer's lids dropped in satisfaction. Laird stared too long, and Kell at last permitted herself a glance that wasn't clinical. It had a pulse. "You will all have observed," Wolfe said calmly, "that the mirror refuses Miss Voss. You will also observe that it has not refused any of you. Yet." That "yet" earned him attention. He extended a hand without looking. I placed in it what I had in my pocket, a velvet-wrapped shard of mirror Lila had described over dessert, or rather its twin. I had stopped at her studio that afternoon for a copy from a broken plate she kept for tests. Wolfe didn't want the original traveling. I didn't want to be the man who lost it. The shard reflected whatever it faced with a zealot's clarity. "Miss Voss," Wolfe said, "hold this." She took it. She lifted it. It showed her the line of her cheek, the set of her mouth, the not-yet-tired eyes. Across the room, Laird recoiled 1/2 inch and recovered. Durant blinked hard. Pearce murmured, "Well," and wished he hadn't. Greer went very still. Kell did not move at all, which was movement enough. "The shard satisfies us that Miss Voss is not mad," Wolfe said. "It also satisfies us that the mirror's behavior is manufactured. Miss Voss appears in unmolested glass. She disappears in this one. Therefore, this one is molested." Durant found his voice. "You're drawing conclusions from parlor tricks." "No," Wolfe said, silk with stones under it. "I'm drawing conclusions from facts. Your vocabulary is immaterial." He gestured Lila away and nodded to me. I draped the mirror again, then, at his glance, undraped. It wasn't magic. It was rhythm. The room's nerves tuned to his tempo. "Now," he said, "to the tamperers. We will proceed in order of eagerness." He pointed at Greer. "Mr. Greer, approach." Greer didn't love being first, which made it better. He stepped forward and faced himself, landing square in the glass. There he was. Tall, tidy, a man happy with his proportion. He tried not to look relieved. "Your firm offered to modernize Miss Voss's studio," Wolfe said, "at her brother's expense. You proposed remote checks, access under the pretense of health. You also sent a technician to assess the mirror. You found nothing. That is untrue. You found a target, and you fitted the frame with what you would call, to a client, a non-invasive element. An element you could activate or that would produce an effect under specific conditions." Greer inclined his head a fraction. "You have a fertile imagination, Mr. Wolfe. We don't install novelties." "You install leverage," Wolfe said. "We will return to you." He lifted a finger at Pearce. "Mr. Pearce." Pearce obliged. He checked his tie in the reflection and let his mouth practice contrition. The mirror obliged him too. "You enlisted the halberds, Dr. Kell," Wolfe said, "to rate the mirror insufficiently grave and to trouble Miss Voss's contracts. In exchange, you dangled donors. You also introduced Mrs. Whitby's courier to Miss Voss's assistant. You will protest you never send couriers, you send messengers. Your man called himself a courier to give Miss Mendez a sense of occasion." Pearce smiled tightly. Wolfe let it die there. "Mrs. Whitby," he said, and the scarf rustled like a small storm. She drifted nearer and regarded herself as if a gala were hiding behind her shoulder. This mirror was originally acquired for your hall, Wolfe said. You commissioned Miss Voss to source it. You enjoy theatre in your domestic spaces. This is theatre. You lent your letterhead to ease an intrusion, and you will tell me you did so because you were told Miss Voss's work had become unstable, and you wished to help preserve reputation, yours and hers. She tilted her head, eyes bright. I dislike being used, Mr. Wolfe. If I was used, I will be less charitable at dinner parties, but I did not send any man to that studio. If my paper was borrowed, it was borrowed, not given. That is one of the few lies that help you, Wolfe said. We will test it. He reserved the glance for last. Dr. Kell. She rose with a motion that said she had never been summoned in her life. She stood before the glass. The room held itself very still. The mirror showed office and air. Everything that was Dr. Tamsin Kell, hair coiled with care, suit severe, chin an edifice, vanished. Not a blur. Not a dimming. The exact absence we had seen with Lila, traced at different edges, the chair behind her crisp and unconcerned. Even Whitby's scarf forgot to move. Durant swore under his breath. Pierce's hand climbed his collar. Laird's eyes cut to Greer so fast the air ought to have smoked. Greer did not blink. He had trained more than his eyes. Kell herself did not step back. She leaned a degree forward, met nothing, and smiled. Not with humor, with fury. Parlor tricks, she said, curiously softly. No, Wolfe replied. Engineering. I advised you not to perform. Her mouth thinned. You think you have me by reflection. Visual phenomena are notoriously tractable, Wolfe suggested. Indeed, especially when one has handled the solvents under which a particular film is invisible until provoked. Her gaze flicked to the solvent shelf in her mind, the swapped acetone and ethanol, the lecture she had delivered there. She said nothing, which was wiser than most of them managed. Wolfe let the silence cut her outline in absentia, then turned his head to Laird. You may stay where you are, Counselor. I do not require your reflection. I require your face when your ally disappeared. It told me enough. Laird's tone was iron-pressed flat. This is absurd. No, Wolfe said. This is exposure. You brought a writ without a marshal because you needed to see for yourself whether the trick traveled. You bent to the glass and flinched. It showed you. That disturbed you. The success of your plan depended upon an illusion that could be contained. At Miss Voss's studio, under Miss Voss's lights, in Miss Voss's presence. My house is not your theater. The fact that Dr. Kell disappears here means the tampering accompanies her, not the glass alone. He folded his hands and let that sink claw by claw. What nonsense! Durant snapped, but the snap was dulled. You expect us to believe you can tag a person for reflection? Yes, Wolfe said. With a substance that alters reflectance under particular illumination, one you need a conservator's shelf to access and a conservator's credentials to justify touching. Applied to skin and hair, it would be troublesome. To clothing, easier. More elegantly, applied to a patch discreetly, say, a scarf, a lapel, a collar, and paired with polarization, you can cancel the returned light in a band that fools the eye unless you know where to look. Crude work produces a dim phantom. Good work produces an absence. Kell laughed. It was the first honest sound she had made. You credit me with a technology I don't possess. I credit you with the arrogance to assist a man with money in breaking a woman without leaving fingerprints, Wolfe said. Mr. Greer provided assessments. Your hand moved bottles and spoke to assistants in the name of rounds. Mr. Pierce smoothed donors. Mr. Durant bullied. Mr. Laird lied. Mrs. Whitby lent paper or had it stolen by someone who knows her stationery. Together you arranged to unperson Miss Voss in her own work. Whitby's scarf finally stirred. If my paper was stolen, who stole it? Your house keeps a secretary who adores important errands, Wolfe said mildly. Her nephew owes money. We will supply the name tomorrow. I made a note to get the name tonight. Wolfe turned his head to Lila. Miss Voss? She stood where Kell had stood, absence again, exacting as geometry. Wolfe nodded once, as if noting the angle of a leaf. Now, he said, step back. Remove your scarf. She frowned. She wasn't wearing one. She glanced at me. I shrugged. He meant the silk around her wrist, the one I'd barely clocked, black on black. She unwound it, more surprised than the rest of them. Again, he said. She stepped, and the mirror offered her back. Faint, then fuller, then as clear as the shard had. There she was. Pierce made a noise. Durant's mouth fell open in a way he would regret later. Greer shifted weight for the first time. Laird's fingers tightened on his briefcase handle. Kell's lips parted and closed as if she had swallowed a needle. Lila looked at herself with a swallow you could hear. She did not cry. She set her jaw and turned to Wolfe. You knew. I guessed, he said. This afternoon, when Mr. Goodwin reported the missing shard and your mention of it, and the courier's 20 minutes, and the solvent shuffle, and Miss Mendez's call from a woman who grades for a living. The simplest scheme was a tag, a removable, portable aid to disappearance. The permanence you feared was the point, not the method. Wolfe leaned back, fat forefinger describing a dot in the air. Mrs. Whitby's courier brought the condition check and left a token that would ensure the effect at your studio, a silk piece prepared to absorb and re-emit light in a band that the mirror's treated surface would cancel under cross-polarized illumination. When you wore it, you vanished. When you did not, you did not. In this house, I controlled the light. Here the effect required the tag alone. That is why Dr. Kell also vanished. She has handled the same preparation today. Perhaps on a handkerchief, perhaps on her sleeve. Miss Mendez will recall. Kara, who had slipped in with Fritz and hovered near the door, whispered, her cuff, last week. She touched the frame and then wiped her cuff. The memory shocked her into boldness. Thank you, Wolfe said. Kell did not blush. She only said, you cannot prove what the compound is without destroying the piece. I do not need to, Wolfe said. I need only show the conspiracy that installed it, which I have. Greer found his throat. Even if any of this were true, and it isn't, you cannot connect, Mr. Voss. Pfui, Wolfe said, and it was hot. You think a man who buys judges by the yard leaves receipts? He leaves patterns, he leaves counsel, he leaves foundation men and museum chairs and vendors who do favors. He leaves a sister forced toward a job she declined. He leaves a mirror that refuses a woman until she obeys. Mr. Voss will not be here tonight because he does not risk rooms he cannot own, but he is here enough. Durant rose. This charade is over. We'll be leaving with... You'll be sitting, I said, stepping 3 inches off the globe. It wasn't muscle. It was tone. He sat. Wolfe didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Mr. Laird, you will telephone your client when you return to your office and advise him that I have preserved every message that matters, every delivery slip, and a copy of the security courtesy contract your Mr. Greer proposed. You will advise him that Miss Voss will make a public statement tomorrow at noon at the Halberd steps, with Mrs. Whitby beside her, unless Mrs. Whitby prefers to discover how quickly her invitations decay when she is seen to have harried a conservator for sport. You will advise him that if he continues, I will oblige him to litigate in air and light. He may prefer shadow. He will choose. Whitby's chin dipped, one shade of agreement. Pierce exhaled relief he hadn't intended to feel. Durant looked like work. Greer did sums and did not enjoy them. Kell stared at the space where she had not been. And, Wolfe added, almost gently, you will all leave the mirror where it is until tomorrow at 4, at which time it will go where it should, not to Mr. Voss, not to you, Mr. Pierce, not to the Halberd as ransom. We will discuss the destination when I have finished with it." He closed his eyes. That was the curtain. No one applauded. They rose in a tangle of offended dignity and calculation, filed past me one by one, and did what such people always do when they have to pass under our lintel. They pretended they had intended to leave all along. When the door latched, the room exhaled. Lila still stood with the silk in her hand, staring at herself, then at Wolfe. "It won't last," she said. "Leonard won't back away." "It will last long enough," Wolfe said, "for you to reclaim your center." He gestured at the silk. "Do not wear that again. Burn it, or keep it if you enjoy souvenirs of attempted subjugation." She smiled with no mirth and wrapped it back around her wrist anyway, then thought better and put it in her bag. "Archie," Wolfe said, not opening his eyes. "Call Saul, then call Lon Cohen. Tomorrow we will need a lensman who loves a billionaire's grimace." "Gladly," I said. In the mirror, I caught my own reflection, solid as ever, and Kell's absence left a shape that would not quite leave my head. The show had ended, but the next act had already started writing itself. The brownstone had its silence back by morning, the kind that seeps into the bricks and makes the air feel accounted for. Fritz was humming in the kitchen, the orchids upstairs were smug, and Wolfe had returned to his chair with the air of a monarch who'd survived another rebellion without having to rise. The mirror was still in the corner, draped again, sulking like a guest who'd stayed past curfew. I'd filed Saul's notes, Ori's tailing, and Fred's log, and the stack on my desk looked fat enough to win a trial all by itself. The headlines from Lon Cohen's morning paper had already started running with what's "We'd fed him. Heiress targeted in mirror plot. Museum figures implicated. Cohen never minded a little seasoning in his stew." Lila Voss came by at 11. She was tired but upright, and when she shook Wolfe's hand, I noticed hers didn't tremble anymore. Kara came too, sticking close, eyes still watchful but no longer haunted. Wolfe inclined his head to them both. "Miss Voss," he said, "your brother will retreat, though not permanently. He's a man who collects grudges. He will place this one on a shelf and attempt again later, more crudely. For the present, however, his circle has been exposed. He will have to spend his strength knitting them together again before he may strike." She nodded, tight but grateful. "And the mirror?" "It is a tool," Wolfe said, "that has been soiled by hands unfit to touch it. It will not be returned to him. Mr. Goodwin will see to its transfer to Mrs. Whitby, who will be reminded what happens when her stationery is misappropriated. In her hall it will remain decorative and harmless. You are absolved of it." Kara let out a breath like she'd been holding it since birth. Lila reached for her hand, and Wolfe did not frown at the gesture. He let it sit in the room a moment before closing his eyes. "Human vanity," he said, "is the most obedient of materials. It reflects whatever power wishes it to. Your brother thought he could make you doubt your own image. He forgot that reflections deceive only the eye. The mind, if it is resolute, cannot be erased by glass." That was Wolfe's benediction, though he would never call it one. He waved them away with a hand that demanded Fritz bring beer instead. They left lighter than they'd come, and the brownstone's order stitched itself closed again. I sat at my desk, finished a note for Cohen, and glanced at the mirror. Draped or not, it seemed to carry a weight it hadn't the day it arrived. "Well," I said, "at least now we know. You can make a woman vanish, but you can't make Wolfe blink." Wolfe grunted, reached for his glass, and delivered the last word without opening his eyes. "Archie, nothing vanishes. It only waits for someone willing to look correctly. That is the whole of detection and of life." And that was that. Fritz announced lunch. The doorbell didn't ring, and the world went back to being the size of a brownstone on West 35th Street, where reflections stay put and justice is served on time. The brownstone had its silence back by morning, the kind that seeps into the bricks and makes the air feel accounted for. Fritz was humming in the kitchen, the orchids upstairs were smug, and Wolfe had returned to his chair with the air of a monarch who'd survived another rebellion without having to rise. The mirror was still in the corner, draped again, sulking like a guest who'd stayed past curfew. I'd filed Saul's notes, Ori's tailing, and Fred's log, and the stack on my desk looked fat enough to win. A trial, all by itself. The headlines from Lon Cohen's morning paper had already started running with what we'd fed him. Heiress targeted in mirror plot, museum figures implicated. Cohen never minded a little seasoning in his stew. Lila Voss came by at 11. She was tired but upright, and when she shook Wolfe's hand, I noticed hers didn't tremble anymore. Kara came too, sticking close, eyes still watchful, but no longer haunted. Wolfe inclined his head to them both. "Miss Voss," he said, "your brother will retreat, though not permanently. He's a man who collects grudges. He will place this one on a shelf and attempt again later, more crudely. For the present, however, his circle has been exposed. He will have to spend his strength knitting them together again before he may strike." She nodded, tight but grateful. "And the mirror?" "It is a tool," Wolfe said, "that has been soiled by hands, unfit to touch it. It will not be returned to him. Mr. Goodwin will see to its transfer to Mrs. Whitby, who will be reminded what happens when her stationery is misappropriated. In her hall, it will remain decorative and harmless. You are absolved of it." Kara let out a breath like she'd been holding it since birth. Lila reached for her hand, and Wolfe did not frown at the gesture. He let it sit in the room a moment before closing his eyes. "Human vanity," he said, "is the most obedient of materials. It reflects whatever power wishes it to. Your brother thought he could make you doubt your own image. He forgot that reflections deceive only the eye. The mind, if it is resolute, cannot be erased by glass." That was Wolfe's benediction, though he would never call it one. He waved them away with a hand that demanded Fritz bring bear instead. They left lighter than they'd come, and the brownstone's order stitched itself closed again. I sat at my desk, finished a note for Cohen, and glanced at the mirror. Draped or not, it seemed to carry a weight it hadn't the day it arrived. "Well," I said, "at least now we know. You can make a woman vanish, but you can't make Wolfe blink." Wolfe grunted, reached for his glass, and delivered the last word without opening his eyes. "Archie, nothing vanishes. It only waits for someone willing to look correctly. That is the whole of detection and of life." And that was that. Fritz announced lunch. The doorbell didn't ring, and the world went back to being the size of a brownstone on West 35th Street, where reflections stay put and justice is served on time. 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 Served on time.